Welcome to The Art of Poetry. I'm Frank Crowley, your usual host, but today is super special. There was a young lad from Sligo. No, I'm not going to do limericks on you. I have two generous guest producers and guest hosts, and they will take it from here. Just to point out, in the setting we have in the studio is an image from the artwork of the Book of Kells, and we've got orange and green. And dear Victor, my friend from 1960, is going to introduce himself, and Bill, and the rest is their show. Enjoy. Thank you.
Hello, I am indeed your guest co-host, Victor Urbanowitz. I'm a sometime teacher of college English. I spent most of my life writing technical manuals. My distinguished co-host is Bill McCarthy, Professor Emeritus of English from Iowa State University. We are devoting this month's show to poems by William Butler Yeats, one of the giants of modern poetry. And if there's a picture of the young Yeats, we could see that now. Yeats lived from 1865 to 1939, and he was born into the Anglo-Irish minority that had once dominated Ireland, but had lost influence by his time, though I think they retained their good opinion of themselves. He was devoted to poetry from his youth and soon came to believe that his art should be centered on Ireland and its culture. Due to the influence of several Irish nationalists he knew, Yeats became the premier Irish poet writing in English, producing what W.H. Auden called some of the most beautiful poetry of modern times. In 1886, when living with his parents in London, Yeats met Maud Gunn, with whom he fell in love and whom he courted for many years, despite her having borne children to a more favored suitor. She was an English woman and an Irish nationalist, and she left her mark on the poetry of Yeats, as well as on his politics and on his poor, vulnerable heart. She also shared his interest in occultism and spiritualism. Yeats was influenced by Blake and Shelley. However, like John Keats, he drew more on concrete, earthbound scenery and imagery. During his time with the Rhymers Club of London, which he helped found, he became committed to form and style. He was not much influenced by the poetic modernism of the early 20th century. In the early 1900s, he helped found the Irish National Theatre, and he began writing plays, and the direct, concrete language that was required by the theater entered his poetry. He abandoned the ornate 19th century style of his previous work, of which we'll see a little. Yeats was an Irish nationalist after his own fashion. He rather abhorred violent rebellion and hoped that England would keep its promises to grant Ireland its freedom. After the 1916 Easter Rebellion, he became more engaged in the nationalist movement, set up permanent residence in Ireland, and after the Irish Free State was formed, he became a senator in the new government. He remained active in producing poetry and drama almost to the end of his life. We will not have time to examine his plays. We will concentrate on some of his poems. Yeats's poetry keeps the reader alert. It mixes concrete language and images, and often very conversational language, with material that reflects his interest in spiritualism and the occult. He produced a large volume of work, frequently revised it with very good results, and he has captured the imagination of readers over the world and over the years. As I said, he was interested in Irish folk art. Some of his poems were set to music. This one, Down by the Sally Gardens, he heard originally sung by a woman, a street vendor perhaps, produced his own version. Benjamin Britten liked it well enough to compose a tune. So we're going to hear Down by the Sally Gardens. So this is a very sentimental folk song, a little bit sugary, like, frankly, a lot of Irish popular songs, though some realism too. It's about a relationship where the young man is a bit immature and he messes it up, and so he he botches the relationship. Not as sentimental as "She was pure, she was beautiful, she loved me, and she's made me the happiest man on earth," or "She's so pure, she's so beautiful, she said she would marry me, then she died," which they like even better. As I say, a bit of gritty realism. But this was still in his 1889, his folky stage. Bill, do you have any reflections on this lyrical piece?
No, not really. I think that Yeats in his later years would probably have been embarrassed by it.
They keep singing it. So something still from the Romantic period. There's really not that much more to say to Down by the Sally Gardens. There's another one that's been set to music, though we won't play that. And this is the ball's in your court, Bill. This is the Lake Isle of Innisfree.
The Lake Isle of Innisfree, which became very popular, so much so that Yeats came to detest it. But nevertheless, he did record it for the BBC in 1937, and his recording of it is pretty impressive. So much so that I have trouble reading the poem without trying to sound like him, but I'm going to try to read it without sounding like him. The Lake Isle of Innisfree. This is a lake in Western Ireland near where his literary friend, Lady Augusta Gregory, lived. And as he thinks of the poem situates him in London. He's living in the city of London at the time that he writes the poem, but you would not know it until the last verse. The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, while I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core. Over to you, Victor.
Yes, very soothing sound, lots of long, low vowels. Arise, go now. Every stanza ends with a shortened line, which makes you slow down and give emphasis. So that's skillful. He wants to create a meditative, peaceful mood.
It's really a very good poem. I mean,
yes.
He may have grown tired of it because it did become very popular, but the fact is, it's a very good poem.
So he wrote conventional poetry, but he didn't hold as strictly to metrical patterns as, say, the Augustans did, or even the early Romantics.
No.
And it is romantic in its emphasis on the retreat to nature, though. Unlike Thoreau, I don't think he ever built a cabin there.
No. But
no, he might have hired somebody to build a cabin, but
I think he read Thoreau.
Yeah. Planting beans and that sort of thing, right?
9 bean rows. Yeah.
Right. So there we are. And as I said, I found this has also been set to music. The Electra Women's Choir, if anyone ever wants to hunt it up on YouTube, it's quite pretty. So this is still in his late Romantic, rather sentimental phrase. And then we're jumping ahead to 1910, thereabouts. That's when this poem was published. A short thing called No Second Troy. Remember the Iliad? Helen of Sparta runs away from her husband Menelaus with Paris, Prince of Troy, and they try to get her back, and there's a 10 years war. Seems they could have handled it another way, but anyway, so. And what does this have to do with Ireland? Well, it's really about Maud Gunn. We have a picture of her. Okay.
I don't know. There is something there.
There it is. It's coming up. Thank you. The poem begins. Why should I blame her that she filled my days with misery, or that she would of late have taught to ignorant men most violent ways, or hurled the little streets upon the great, had they but courage equal to desire? What could have made her peaceful with a mind that nobleness made simple as a fire, with beauty like a tightened bow, a kind that is not natural in an age like this, being high and solitary and most stern? Why, what could she have done being what she is? Is there another Troy for her to burn? That's really a slam at the lady, I would say. High, very mixed praise, you know. He admired her. You can tell he's fixated on her. He says she would hurl the little streets upon the great had they but courage equal to desire. At that time, he didn't think the Irish really had the courage to set up a resolute rebellion. He changed his mind a few years later. And he says, her mind was one that nobleness made simple as a fire. And you wonder, is it nobility or fanaticism? The forward thrust of the poem draws from the fact that it consists of 4 rhetorical questions, 2 of 5 lines each, and then the final 2 of 1 line each. So it keeps its unity of tone and its intensity from that. What could she have done being what she is? Was there another Troy for her to burn? So that is the skill of the poem, and that's what preserves the feeling behind it over all these years. I think by comparing Maud Gunn to Helen of Troy, I think Helen of Troy, by comparison, was a much more passive figure. They fought over her, but she didn't do much. Well, Maud was in there mixing it up, I would say.
Yes. Yeah. The interesting thing about that poem is, I think you're right, the rhetorical questions, this set of questions. Yeats's syntax, his command of grammar and syntax and sentence structure, I mean, generally, is superb. Shall we move on to the next big one?
Let's see, I have to turn the page to find out what that is. Oh, okay.
It's Easter 1916.
I think I've got the collarbone of a hare. Should we skip that one?
We may need to. I have a feeling we're taking longer than we should.
Let's see, we're at, we started at 11:15, so we've taken 25 minutes. Let's skip the bunny poem and go on to Easter 1916.
Easter 1916. A little bit of historical background. It is an actual fact, as every Irishman probably knows now and has known forever, that on Easter Day 1916, there was a rising in Dublin of a splinter group of the Irish nationalist movement who undertook to do by violence and shooting what really could not be done. They commanded the General Post Office and 1 or 2 other public buildings, but they were quickly put down by the British Army and they were all executed. They were people, some of whom Yeats had known. And he was very much surprised by the undertaking. He had no idea that this was going to happen. And some of the people who were involved in it were people he really didn't like. And he did not believe in undertaking violence to do what he thought England would do anyway. England had promised to give Ireland its independence after the end of the war. And the war was still in progress at the time of this uprising. So here it is, Easter 1916. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk among gray 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head or polite, meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite, meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fire at the club, being certain that they and I but lived where motley is worn. All changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers when, young and beautiful, she rode to harriers? This man had kept a school and rode our winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I had dreamed a drunken, vainglorious lout. He had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart. Yet I number him in the song. He too has resigned his part in the casual comedy. He too has been changed in his turn, transformed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Hearts with one purpose alone through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud on the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slides on the brim, and a horse plashes within it. The long-legged moorhens dive, and hens to moorcocks call. Minute by minute they live, the stones in the midst of all. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. Oh, when may it suffice? That is heaven's part, our part to murmur name upon name. As a mother names her child when sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild. What is it but nightfall? No, not night, but death. Was it needless death after all? For England may keep faith for all it is done and said. We know their dream, enough to know they dreamed and are dead. And what if excess of love bewildered them till they died? I write it out in a verse. MacDonough and MacBride and Connolly and Pearse, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. The interesting thing I think about that, well, I mean, many interesting things. One of the interesting things about that poem, I think, is the fact that in order to write it out in a verse, to write that little commemorative verse about these people, Yeats has to go through various sort of mental, he has to get himself ready. He lets us hear him getting his mind around the fact that these people, some of whom he really hated, have become heroes and worthy of writing an elegy to. Much of the poem, most of the poem, is about Yeats himself working himself around to the fact that he has to write this and he can write it. It's an extraordinarily honest poem. So,
And then I think that section after he describes the people, that description basically describes the singleness there. Again, I would say the word maybe fanatical and ill-judged singleness of purpose, and uses all this nature imagery. So he's, and they draw themselves away from the flow of life and maybe put themselves out of touch. And it's all just nature description.
Yep.
And you get exactly how he feels about it.
Too long sacrifice can make a stone of the heart.
Right. So all that beautiful nature imagery,
Yes.
Right are the birds that range from cloud to tumbling cloud. Minute by minute they change, a shadow of cloud, etc., etc. All the stuff. Here is all the flow of nature. Here is the fanatic like a stone in the stream. So,
but you can't dismiss them. You have to end up admiring them. A terrible beauty is born.
Right. And sometimes seems, he puts it in my mind, sometimes that kind of rigidity of purpose is necessary to achieve anything, although he really doubts it.
Something great. And one more little detail. Wherever green is worn, Yeats personally hated the green, thing with Ireland. His favorite color was blue.
Which is also deeply associated with Irish identity.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. Not just him.
Okay.
I forget the exact connection, but I'm sure you and everyone else are in the Northeast, so we'll find some Irish lover of things Irish that can explain that if necessary.
Okay.
And the interesting thing, the woman he's criticizing is Constance, the Countess Markievicz. She was an English woman, resident in Ireland, who married an exiled Polish count.
Yep.
You see his idea. She spoiled her charm and beauty by getting into politics.
Getting into politics, yes.
What voice more sweet than hers when young and beautiful she rode to harriers, much better occupied. What's a harrier? It's a dog that chases rabbits, hares, right? So
I think so.
Yeah, much better on the hunt than in politics.
Yeah.
We don't agree with a great deal about Yeats. We admire him and disagree with him intensely.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, his social attitudes are not too good, but you forgive him that for his poetry.
Sure, if you can.
There's a lot to forgive him for, but anybody who can write a poem like Easter 1916, okay.
Yep. Got to give it to them.
Yep.
A terrible beauty is born.
Yep. Yes. You could say that of him too.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And there's another poem about war and violence. We'll follow with the Irish Airmen if you're ready to go.
Ready to go. Take it away.
Oh, wait, what's this? We're about halfway through.
Okay, no problem.
Or can we take the PSA break now?
What?
Community TV, your neighborhood TV.
Publicly funded and a reliable partner for cable companies nationwide, it provides transparent coverage of local and state government, education, and public programming.
A digital town green that can be watched anywhere, anytime, and on any device.
Watch us on today's high-tech distribution methods.
Community TV in Connecticut.
Local,
unfiltered,
reliable, and yours.
Each
year, there are more than a dozen significant tropical and winter storms that threaten the East Coast. So chances are there will be more hurricanes and blizzards near here again. And between school, sports, and social lives, chances are you won't be with your kids when it happens. Will they know what to do? Ready.gov/kids has all the educational tools and information to make the conversation easy. When the time comes, chances are they'll feel prepared, not scared. So talk with your family today.
Smart TVs and streaming services have taken over the television industry. VSC TV is proud to announce our presence on Apple TV and Roku to make watching your favorite shows even easier. You can access this service by downloading the Cablecast ScreenWeave app. Then choose Valley Shore Community TV from the list of channels. Select VSC TV Live to watch our channel in full HD. Or pick a show from our on-demand video library. VSC TV is your local Connecticut Mid-Shore Valley digital connection.
Get it. Get it.
Get it.
Get it. Get it.
Get it. Get it.
Is she gonna get it, Daddy?
She'll get it. Get it. Get it.
When you bring home a Goodwill find, you give your whole town a reason to celebrate because you're also funding local job training and placement programs in tech, healthcare, and more. Goodwill. Bring good home.
Well, here we are back again. I'm afraid we're still on war and violence and the poetry of Yeats because our next poem, the Easter 1916 rebellion, was not successful, and therefore Ireland was still part of the United Kingdom and more or less involved in the First World War. And one of Yeats's circle who got involved was Major Robert Gregory, son of Lady Augusta. And he wrote this poem, which is supposed to be about Major Robert speaking. It's called An Irish Airman Foresees His Death. I'm just going to spoil it. He did crash and die. And that's when Yeats wrote this.
You have to say. Otherwise the poem would be unintelligible.
Absolutely. Right. So Major Robert didn't write this because he was dead, but Yeats wrote it for him.
Yes.
The complications of literature. Okay.
That's right.
I know that I shall meet my fate somewhere among the clouds above. Those that I fight, I do not hate. Those that I guard, I do not love. My country is Kiltartan Cross. My countrymen Kiltartans poor. No likely end could bring them loss or leave them happier than before. Nor law nor duty bade me fight, nor public men, nor cheering crowds. A lonely impulse of delight drove to this tumult in the clouds. I balanced all, brought all to mind. The years to come seemed waste of breath, a waste of breath the years behind, in balance with this life, this death.
What a poem. This, again, it's the way he manages sentences. Everything is beautifully balanced. Syntactically, everything is beautifully balanced.
Alexander Pope would not have been ashamed of these verses.
No way.
And he was really fussy.
Now, that is a superb poem.
Right. And you expect it might end with a couplet since it's alternate rhyme, but instead you just get that last line, death rhyming with breath, and it gives it a sudden, stark ending. And when you hear of a death, it always seems unexpected too.
Yeah.
So that's life. But I believe the Major's mother was not too happy with this poem.
So it seems, and it seems that Yeats and Robert Gregory did not get along. I had forgotten that detail. Yeats
I think
wonderful at writing poems about the death of people he didn't like.
And I think Robert Gregory saw himself as much British as Irish.
He was in the RAF, right?
He was in the RAF.
Yeah.
Ireland was part of Britain, and that seemed to be okay with him. And I think he actually died in some sort of air accident, not in combat.
Not a tumult in the clouds.
Nope. Some sort of engine failure in Italy. But it makes him look like kind of he was motivated by kind of suicidal aestheticism, you know? What a splendid way to die. As for living, our servants can do that for us, you know?
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
As I think some decadent French writer said. And he did have a family. He had a wife and 3 children. Mm-hmm. So you wonder about his motivation. I don't think he was not drafted into the Royal Air Force.
Maybe Yeats was right.
Maybe he was right, yeah.
Oh dear.
It's beautifully done, and I think highly inaccurate about the man, I think. Or maybe, as you say, maybe not.
Maybe not. But the in balance with this life, this death, the word balance, I mean, there it is, right in the poem. And the poem is itself superbly balanced. Mm-hmm. Every sentence, every phrase, it's like using the word is as much as to say, see, it's balanced.
Yeah, sure. I think I first encountered this book in high school anthology, when you think that would have shielded us from such attitudes, but
you might think that. I think it was one of the first Yeats poems I encountered too. I first read it a long, long time ago.
Yeah. The old boy's been gone a long time. So
yeah.
Let's see. We still have a generous amount of time left. So, well, we could talk a long time about the Irish Airman, but the reader knows where to find it. So we'll let our audiences savor it on their own time. And
you may have time for Auden at the end.
Right. Maybe even the bunny poem, but we'll see.
The bunny poem. But let's see what we can do with the Second Coming.
Second Coming.
This is a poem which is much quoted. There are phrases in it which probably people hearing the poem perhaps for the first time will nevertheless recognize as phrases they have heard. So it's much quoted, and it's a famous poem. It's a very strange poem in that it expresses a belief that Yeats actually had. He believed that history runs in cycles over roughly 2,000 years each, and that the end of a cycle would be made manifest by a sort of general cultural decay, which might indicate that the next cycle is going to be pretty fearsome. He also believed that he believed in the spirit world, which you could access by prolonged meditation. He believed that if you said what we would be inclined to call the magic words, they would actually summon up a vision, a literal vision of whatever it is they were going to bring to your mind. And the vision could be horrible. It could be absolutely terrifying. And this is a poem about contemplating the state of the world, having the vision conjured up by we might almost say magic words, and leaving the speaker absolutely shattered. And you can hear it in the way the poem ends. This is a poem written in iambic pentameter, that is to say, 10 syllables to a line with alternate stresses. But at the end, the meter falls apart, and its falling apart enacts the total emotional devastation of the speaker. And in that sense, it's a very powerful poem. So here we go, the second coming. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vanity troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again. But now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born?
Pretty
I
nightmarish.
don't know what one said. You say something. It's a knockout. It's crazy, but it's a knockout. I mean, his beliefs, very few, I suspect, share his literal belief in being able to summon an image up out of the spirit world simply by thinking about it or by saying magic words like the second coming. Hardly are those words out. But it's a knockout poem, even so. So much is Yeats is like that. You don't necessarily agree with him, and in fact, you may very much powerfully disagree with him. But the poems are knockouts.
It's the metaphors, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. All the lines strictly are 10 syllables, but as I say, the meter falls apart. At times.
Meter falls apart, yeah.
And instead,
Yep.
like the last one, it's 10 syllables, but really there are 3 major stresses. So again,
You would never read this 10 syllables. You could count 10 syllables in it, but you would never read it that way.
Right.
The rest of the poem is what's called iambic pentameter, 10 syllables, lines with 5 stresses. But not this last line. The last line is his knees are shaking. He is barely able to articulate. He has seen something so frightening. What he has seen seems to be, it sounds from the description, it sounds like what he's seen is the Egyptian Sphinx. I'm not sure why that would be particularly frightening, but I guess if it up and started moving, that might be frightening.
Yeah, let's say the Sphinx in the Oedipus myth was a woman, but and we don't know what gender the Sphinx is in Egypt, but I haven't done any Sphinx research. But it's a nice monstrous image anyway, and not nice like Jesus at all.
No, it's slanting towards Bethlehem to be born. That's a real zinger. And it's not like Jesus, but New Ages begin at Bethlehem, don't they?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of rough stuff going on around Bethlehem these days. So he wasn't aware of that then. Yeah, and you say the iambic pentameter line falls apart in the last line, and it is really violated in the first line too.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's true. Turning and turning in the widening gyre. Yeah, it is.
Then he pulls it back in.
The only line that I think you could say is absolutely, definitely an iambic pentameter is the second line. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. You can begin that.
There's a third is a very conventional variation, trochaic line followed by an iambic line. That's done a lot. Even the Augustines did that for variety, as much variety as they could tolerate anyway.
Actually, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world is a pretty iambic line too.
Right. He sticks close to it, and then he pulls away, but always plenty of stress in the line.
Yeah.
And the reason is you can apply it to so many historical political situations, you know.
Yes,
of course, the ceremony of innocence is drawn, meaning, of course, the gracious, elegant ways of the old English ascendancy.
Yes, unfortunately, that's what that means.
The Irish just don't know how to serve high tea, you know.
But the bits that are most quoted, things fall apart, the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of. You can apply that to any political side. You know, if you happen to be a liberal lefty, that works. Those lines work for us. They're not particularly appropriated to the situation that Yeats himself deplored.
Right, but an elitist conservative can quote those too.
I mean, they're in a sense content free. They're not. They don't have any particular appropriated political content. They can be quoted equally by both sides. And I think that's why they are so much quoted.
Right. Yeah.
Indeed, my sense of it is that they're likely to be more quoted by those of us on the left than they are by people on the right.
Yes, and we won't get too political by putting in applications to the present day. So.
No, we won't do that. We won't go.
Okay.
People draw their own conclusions.
That's right. Let's see. So yes, very, very popular poem.
Yeah.
Let's see, we have how much more time now?
I don't know.
Oh, let me look.
You look.
15 minutes? My. We still have time. Okay. Let's
John Kinsella.
Okay, let's do John Kinsella. Okay, warning. Sensitive souls leave the room. Get the children out. The speaker of this poem gladly accepts prostitution, expresses casual anti-Semitism, and has a most unorthodox view of humanity before the fall. Thank you for the picture of Yeats in his older years. In his younger years, he was a wounded, sensitive, frustrated lover.
Yes, he was.
In his later years, he took radical medical measures to restore his virility. He became kind of a lecherous old man.
Yes.
And so John Kinsella may not be William Butler Yeats, but they had a lot of sympathy. And if Frank loses a show because of that, he said I could read it, so I'm going to read it. John Kinsella's Lament for Mary Moore. A bloody and a sudden and gunshot or a noose for death, who takes what man would keep, leaves what man would lose. He might have had my sister, my cousins by the score, but nothing satisfied the fool but my dear Mary Moore. None other knows what pleasures man at table or in bed. What shall I do for pretty girls now my old bawd is dead? I warned you. And there's worse to come. Though stiff to strike a bargain like an old Jew man, her bargain struck. We laughed and talked and emptied many a can. And oh, but she had stories, though not for the priest's ear, to keep the soul of man alive, banish age and care. And being old, she put her skin on everything she said. What shall I do for pretty girls now my old bawd is dead? The priests have got a book that says, but for Adam's sin, Eden's garden would be there and I there within. No expectation fails there, no pleasing habit ends. No man grows old, no girl grows cold, but friends walk by friends. Who quarrels over halfpennies that plucks the trees for bread? What shall I do for pretty girls? Now my old bawd is dead. That was written in 1938, the penultimate year. Shame on you, William. Not me for reading it. Not on me for reading
Very
it.
touching poem, actually.
A great what poem?
It's a very touching poem.
I suppose, yes. The old lady, wicked old lady died, yes.
Memento of poor Joan Kinsella. Ah, what shall I do now my old bawd is dead? Ah. It's an old age poem.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as I said, this is, as I say, the penultimate year. This was published 1938. He died in the 1939.
He died in January of 39 too. He barely made it into the year.
Yeah. So I don't know. The young Yeats was sort of too wounded, rejected, and vulnerable, and the old Yeats was really too much of an old goat, wasn't he?
It's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. Yeah.
And we can, suppose we could go on to the tribute to Yeats.
I said it. Cold, cold day.
Yes.
James.
I said at the beginning of the show that W.H. Auden said that Yeats wrote some of the most beautiful poetry in English. And when Yeats died in 1939, everyone knows another world war is about to break out. He wrote a long poem, and the last section of it is an artistic tribute to Yeats because it imitates the closing of Under Ben Bulben.
Yes, it does.
Same meter.
Mm-hmm.
Earth, receive an honored guest. William Yeats is laid to rest. Let the Irish vessel lie emptied of its poetry. Time that is intolerant of the brave and innocent and indifferent in a weak to a beautiful physique, worships language and forgives everyone by whom it lives, pardons cowardice, conceit, lays its honors at their feet. Time that with this strange excuse pardoned Kipling and his views, and will pardon Paul Claudel, pardons him for writing well. In the nightmare of the dark, all the dogs of Europe bark, and the living nations wait, each sequestered in its hate. Intellectual disgrace stares from every human face, and the seas of pity lie locked and frozen in each eye. Follow, poet, follow right to the bottom of the night. With your unconstraining voice, still persuade us to rejoice. With the farming of a verse, make a vineyard of the curse. Sing of human unsuccess in a rapture of distress. In the deserts of the heart, let the healing fountain start. In the prison of his days, teach the free man how to praise.
Well, never wrote a better poem than that.
Yeah, you think that's his best, right? Yeah.
Of what I know, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really very fine.
Right.
And it was inspired by a very fine poet, so that makes sense.
Right.
When you have a good subject, you can write good stuff.
Right. And as in Yeats in Easter 1916, Auden was very frank about his subject.
Yes, he was.
You were silly like us, your gift survived it all. The parish of rich women, physical decay, yourself.
Yes.
That's in there.
Yes.
Your poetry survived you.
Yes.
That's good. That's some good poetry.
That's about right. Yes.
Right.
Yep. Yes.
Well, I think wrapping up our comment on Yeats, if you want to write English poetry, you've got to read Yeats or you're missing out on something. If you want to write good English prose, you have to read Yeats.
Yes, that's true too. His autobiographies are among the best things I've ever read. I read Reveries Over Childhood and Youth very soon after I'd first encountered Yeats, and I was absolutely enthralled by it. He projects a persona of just a plain, sort of simple, undevious kind of person. And I remember being really shocked when I discovered that Yeats was actually normally humanly devious. He projected an image so well that it seemed really true.
And he was a great actor. No wonder he was a successful playwright as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've just been prompted that Frank is going to join us at the end of the show.
Very good.
Nice to see him again.
Good to see you, Frank. Come on in. Join the crowd.
Less than 2 minutes left. So.
Well, I can die a happy man, speaking of death, because there's a smile on my face.
Yes.
This is the ultimate art of poetry show.
Yes.
Utterly spectacular. You both read brilliantly. Oh my God, the poetry came alive.
Thank you.
And my sainted, benighted Irish grandmother would be so pleased. You tugged at my Irish heart.
Mm-hmm.
The tears were in my eyes.
Oh,
You made it so alive. So, from death to life, let's celebrate. Oh, number 9 is a classic. Art of Poetry, number 9.
Is this number 9?
Yes, and tell your friends and your family. But you know, you're going to touch the hearts of all my neighbors in this wonderful senior citizen community.
Right.
Where they turn on the show Monday nights at 8 o'clock, like clockwork. And there you are. You'll be on for the next 2 months because we're taking a summer break.
Yes, okay. When do we appear then? September?
You will now, starting Monday evening, be on for 2 months solid. And
Really?
always check.
Monday?
You can find it on the internet. We are a wrap. Thank you, gentlemen. It was the best ever. I'm so grateful.
Great fun. Thanks for the invitation.
It was.
Well, Victor, woohoo.